You're joining part 2 of our latest episode of Crypto Clarified, Investing in the Truth, a podcast series where we come together each month to discuss the most captivating headlines and trends from the investing in crypto space. My name's Benjamin Dean, I'm director in Wisdom Tree's digital assets team, and I'm joined by my co-host, Camilla Russo, who's founder of Defiant Media. Previously, we tackled some of the recent headlines around crypto markets. Today, we'll be moving on to tackle key investor questions and educational topics, as well as debunking some of the popular misconceptions around cryptocurrencies in our Crypto Myth Buster session.
I just heard Web3 from you, Cami, but I was told this week on the internet that Web5 is a thing. Jack Dorsey, former CEO of Twitter, now CEO of Block, really is it's a DeFi company. They have decided that we are not going to do Web3, which is what Andreessen Horowitz wants us to do. They want to do Web5. Cami, did you see this news about what Jack Dorsey is doing? He wants to build DeFi applications on top of Bitcoin. It's called Web5. It's very tongue-in-cheek. Did you see this? What are your thoughts on it?
It's just like it's I don't have a clear view. I am skeptical that it'll work, to be honest. I just like saw right now it's just an idea and a couple of documents and a presentation. There's not much there. So, you know, that's kind of big question mark as to kind of what will actually be produced. So we'll definitely give them the benefit of the doubt. But you know, people have been trying to make Web3 work on top of Bitcoin since Bitcoin, you know, has been around, basically. You know, there was the Bitcoin 2.0 movement, and that's where Vitalik got the idea of Ethereum in the first place, because he was looking at like watching all these teams trying to build functionality on top of Bitcoin, failing, and saw, okay, there really is a need for a more flexible blockchain that can support different applications, and that's how Ethereum was born. So, you know, this has been happening and has been attempted since at least 2013, and it just hasn't succeeded because Bitcoin simply was not built for that. It was built to be this just like very simple protocol for sending and receiving money. And that's it, you know. I don't think it needs to be more than that. There's kind of Rootstock and like all these side chains trying to add kind of smart contracts to Bitcoin, but they just have failed to take off. So I'm not sure kind of what Jack Dorsey will do differently. And his, I think the name of the company is TBD. It's called TBD. So, you know, he's a smart guy. Maybe he's figured it out, but I'm hugely skeptical, just like from the history of so many people trying to, who have already tried to do this before.
Yeah. So we've got Cami Russo here, founder of the Defiant.io, Jason Guthrie, head of product digital assets at Wisdom Tree. Jason, let's like unpack that a little bit, right? So it's buzzword bingo, right? Web5, Web3, TBD. It's all kind of funny, but not that funny. What is this like? Let's unpack it a bit. Like, what are these people trying to do? You were both hating on Facebook just before, so there's the hint. But like, what are people trying to build here? What does like the next 12 to 24 months look like in terms of building this Web5?
Look, all of these like branding movement or an ecosystem that hasn't developed yet, I think is a bit silly in and of itself, right? And so, you know, Web3 is poorly defined, right? Other than it should be this more distributed internet as opposed to the big central hubs that we see today. But a lot of people have a lot of different visions on actually how that will come into existence. So I think for the most part, this is Jack Dorsey taking a swipe at the silliness of what that kind of branding stuff is, right? Calling it Web5. But it does seem that he has a very specific Bitcoin-centric view of the world. which might be an idealistic way to kind of go about it. But Cami, as you say, the guy is smart. He's super well funded. He's not really beholden to kind of any stakeholders. He doesn't need to chase VC cash. So, with the amount of detail that's out there right now, would I bet against him? No, but I am with you that it doesn't seem to be kind of deep enough on there. But what he's trying to do isn't conceptually out of the realm of possibility, and this goes back to what is sort of becoming the theme of this podcast is like, how do you get adoption of something? Because there are smart contract platforms built on top of Bitcoin, and I believe they do work at least well enough, but you don't really seem to get the same communities of projects and developers coming to it that there is around Ethereum and around a lot of the sort of Ethereum competitor chains, right? Be that like a scaling solution like Polygon or something like Avalanche or Sol. So I think getting that together is kind of the key for it. What the pathway is to do that, I don't know.
It is perplexing. I mean, the Bitcoin blockchain, as Cami said, it is built in a high fault tolerant fashion. It's only meant to do some very specific things. And yet the idea that you build a self-sovereign identity system on top of it, I look at that, I don't know quite what to make of it.
I mean, like my best guess is he's trying to create the EVM ecosystem of Bitcoin or EVM compatible ecosystem of Bitcoin, right? To use an analogy. So like, do we need like a polygon of Bitcoin to kind of help it scale, but you have the same blockchain address that's usable across these various sort of side chains or scaling solutions or what have you, in the same way that, anything that is EVM compatible, you can use that one address across them all. And so you can have your address on Ethereum and your address on Polygon and your address in a ZK rollup and your address in Avalanche. And it will sort of be the same. And that's kind of a usability thing across an ecosystem. I think he wants to get an ecosystem like that, but based on like the Bitcoin address as your unit of record or your identity of record. But let's see, it isn't well enough to find yet.
Yeah, fair enough. Unless there are any extra thoughts before we move on to the segment, we have got a question from a listener from last month, and this person asks the following: do you think ZK rollups, for example, loop ring, are the future of Ethereum or ETH 2.0? This question is about privacy on a blockchain. Jason, I know that's one of the elements you think about as part of Wisdom Tree Prime and the offering there. But Cami, I'm also conscious that you may also have some thoughts around privacy on blockchains. Jason, is that ZK rollups? Is that
I think ZK rollups are super interesting as a technology, as a scaling solution, and some of like zero knowledge privacy stuff. I think has potential to be really powerful. Like I'm by no means an expert in the technology itself, and so I won't kind of comment on that. And we haven't looked to build on it yet either, so I can't kind of speak to how easily integrated it is. But conceptually, I think it's something that is needed in the market as part of, a toolkit for building usable DeFi, right? We know that like adoption. Look, people are funny about their money. They do like to keep their cards pretty close to their chest. If I was holding all of my assets in an on-chain environment and I want you to, send me $50 for the dinner I picked up last night or whatever it is, and by giving you my public address, you can see all of my finances, that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, right? And if we talk about bringing 1 billion everyday people on, that needs to be solved for. So I think this is going to be part of, this is a technology tool that will improve, service providers' ability to have a more usable ecosystem. And so it's definitely something we're thinking about a lot with the Wisdom Tree Prime, financial services on-chain offering that we're trying to build out. But as a kind of wider point, I think privacy is going to be a key thing for adoption.
Okay. Cami, privacy on-chain, I mean, it's a perennial problem. It's just there. Do you have any addendums on that?
Yeah. I agree that it's an issue that will have to be solved for adoption. Nobody wants their entire financial history to be, just publicly visible. No individual wants that, and no institution will want that to kind of meaningfully adopt blockchains, public blockchains, either. So I think ZK-rollups do offer a viable kind of solution for this. As with so many or all scaling solutions, it's in very early stages. But there are already projects building on these technologies, like you mentioned. I think probably Loopring is the biggest one at the moment, and they have been getting good traction, I understand, on their decks. So there is some kind of early signs that it can be done, and it is working. So it's encouraging. There's also other just like privacy focused chains competing with these Ethereum kind of scaling solutions with ZK rollups. There's Secret network that was kind of built from the ground up for privacy. I think Aztec as well, or maybe that's a privacy project. But in any case, there's a lot of competition in the privacy space from both kind of Ethereum scaling solutions to just like privacy focused alternative L1s. So the good thing is that this problem is being worked on. So I believe there will be a solution in the future, but I think right now it's kind of the time to test all of these things out and see kind of which is best.
It almost feels like we've talked about adoption today a lot, and like, what is the next step? I don't see how this technology is going to scale up to billions of users without people being able to kind of mask their addresses.
100%.
And so there is the ZK snark piece, which is privacy technology, and then the ZK rollup thing, which is scalability. We've just identified two elements that have to happen, right, for us to get to the next stage. Scalability, you have transaction throughput on the networks, and you also need to have some kind of a privacy solution out of the box. Like they are two of the elements. We do have 15 minutes left on the clock, which is good news because we're going to flesh out that point a little bit more. Cami, thinking ahead then, we've said scalability and privacy. I think you mentioned UI before. What are like maybe 2 to 3 things that have to happen in the next 6 to 18 months for us to continue this adoption curve, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, more on that line, like on scalability, it's being able to transact on blockchains without without spending a lot of money per transaction, without waiting a lot of time for those transactions to confirm. So that's kind of the main thing on the scalability front. How that happens, I don't know, but that's the main thing that we need to solve for. Just like fast, cheap transactions while kind of keeping decentralization, because otherwise, what's the point of using blockchains? You just like might as well go and use Web2 AWS. So it's like that kind of trilemma, right? Then on the UX UI front, it's being able to access these applications from your phone, and that's kind of the way most people access on like internet applications. And right now, most of Web3 is kind of desktop based. So that's kind of a big kind of project, kind of bringing everything to you, like making everything mobile friendly, and not requiring so many steps. Just like better on ramps will be key. Not having to buy crypto on a centralized exchange, take that crypto to a Web3 wallet and like save your private keys and use that Web3 wallet to access some other kind of DeFi app or whatever. Like those are way too many steps for like regular people to even kind of care about learning. So that needs to be solved for just like a better on-ramp for regular people who have just like US dollars or whatever the local currency is to like just like easily access Web3. Regulatory clarity will be hugely helpful. You know, there was this big crypto bill proposed recently. So I think that's a step in the right direction. And I think, you know, things like privacy will be important, but to be honest, I don't view that as urgent a need right now. I think it'll come and it'll be important, but yeah, to me, just being able to easily, cheaply, and quickly access Web3 will be kind of the key problems to solve for, while maintaining decentralization.
Got it. Yeah. Remove the friction. Interesting. Jason, what if you had a wish list then? 2 to 3 things that need to happen. Do you agree with Cami?
She stole all my talking points on that one. Look, I bundle a lot of that. I'm into all of that, right? And I think that's all of that needs to happen. I kind of bundle a lot of that up into this concept of like interoperability. Like we need to make the great innovation that is there organically being developed in the DeFi space more interoperable with some of the existing systems that are there today in order just to make it more usable, right? And I think all of that can happen, needs to happen behind the scenes. I don't think, you know, this isn't something the user should be doing, copy and pasting addresses and getting something from one place and putting it in another. That needs to be pulled together into like a packaged set of services and offered to people in something that is easy to use on your phone, and ideally gets a regulated stamp of approval for the various components inside it. I think that as a package would be a really compelling way to pull people in.
You've just mentioned something actually, and in a way, bearing the lead is what's happened this week. With all the market turmoil, the key element that was missed was that, as Cami said, a bill was tabled in Congress around essentially digital asset regulation. Senator Lummis and Gillibrand co-sponsored the bill. It ends up on the table in Washington, D.C. We have seen addendums to previous bills, like the infrastructure bill, with crypto or digital asset provisions. This week, a bill turns up that says, fine, we're gonna regulate it, but we're also gonna delegate Bitcoin and Ethereum. That will go to the CFTC, Commodities and Future Trading Commission, instead of the SEC. So actually, if you step back and you have a look at what's going on, yes, the numbers are down and red. But if I look at that and I compare it to, like, at least when I lived in Washington, D.C. 5 years ago, the idea that a bill would be put out like that to regulate the space, give that clarity that wasn't there before, that is probably the most positive sign I've seen in a few years, except the executive order for responsible digital.
It's not surprising though, right? Like we've definitely talked about this on a previous episode, but
True.
Crypto's is increasingly becoming a voting issue for people, and something that people can campaign on, right? So I mean, we were at the Coin Center Gala, which is an event at Consensus, and there were 2 or 3 senators there, like attending this event with these very, you know, crypto native people who've been in the space for the better part of a decade. And they're in there and they want to be seen and they want to shake a lot of hands. It's something that people will campaign on and get elected for. So the idea that we're now starting to see stuff hitting the floor, I don't think is surprising. And, you know, frankly, we called this like 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's true. I was definitely at that Coin Center Gala and I definitely made a new friend, which was a senator of the United States. So that's reality. That's just the way it goes. Good point, though. Indeed, we have been tracking that topic, policy developments in different parts of the world for months now, and the developments keep coming. Increasing regulatory clarity And basically, as this technology is assimilated into the existing regulatory and legislative frameworks, it's just happening bit by bit. That's the foundation. That kind of regulatory clarity is going to give the next wave of opportunities a lot of runway. Thinking ahead now for the next few months, what has got your attention? There's so many different things to track in this space. It moves so fast. What has your attention at the moment?
No, I think it'll be keeping our eyes peeled and ears to the ground, and just seeing what developers and teams are building. All the innovation that we expect will happen. So that means going to hackathons, speaking to founders, just being tracking the space closely to see kind of what's new and what's coming up. I think I started the Defiant in 2019 in the middle of the bear market, and I remember it was so busy. It was I was doing this. I started it as a daily newsletter, and I thought, wow, I really hope to have enough material to do this daily. And it was I had to bring on contributors to help me kind of cover everything that was happening in the middle of this kind of crypto winter. So I'm sure this will be the same times, a multiple, because of what we said before, just the exponential amount of capital and people that came to the space in the past couple of years. So yeah, I'm just exciting to track that, to see all the kind of new projects that start coming up.
See, this optimism, you definitely don't work in finance then, Cami, because everyone is so pessimistic. Speaking about people who work in finance, Jason, what are you looking out at? Are you as pessimistic as your peers in finance, or are you going to be optimistic like Cami?
I'm both, right? And I'll go back to something I said at the start. We've got to separate what's going on in the market with the price from what's going on the ground in the crypto industry and the DeFi industry, right? I'm pretty pessimistic on what's happening in markets right now. I think prices are going to be depressed for a while. I think a bunch of stuff is going to keep selling off, and a lot of economies don't look in really great shape, right? Which is why everybody in finance is miserable. But I'm hugely optimistic on what is getting built in the space and the potential for this technology. I've said it before. I'm just off the back of being at two major conferences, and the energy that is still in the room and the amount of intelligence and people working on cool things despite all this noise around it is obvious, right? And I think if you spend any time kind of around it, it can't help but put you in an optimistic mood about this space. So no, I'm still super positive on what's being built here and the potential for what can emerge from this technology.
This is, well, I'm glad, well, maybe I am crazy, but it's nice to chat with you both about this. The element that has got me confused right now is it's almost a dissonance. As part of my role at Wisdom Tree, I go out and meet a lot of institutional investors. The level of pessimism I get from them is striking. That is partly because their 60-40 portfolios are getting burned down. Those things aren't meant to go down at the same time. So I understand why they're that pessimistic. On the other hand, as we were in consensus earlier this week in Austin, Texas, or the Ethereum Developer Conference in Amsterdam 2 months ago, Cami, I know you're on the road a lot meeting builders and folks who are trying to start the companies that are going to be the next wave of opportunities. I'm struck by how optimistic and positive the people who are building companies are and building technology. They're well funded. This does not feel like 2018 crypto winter, ICO bottom falls out, and everything's failed. If anything, the dissonance between the level of pessimism, the sentiment, almost people's emotions, against what's objectively happening in reality, just people building, is just so striking. I have trouble reconciling it myself, but I appreciate your thoughts to kind of help color it out a bit. It's the most fascinating thing I've seen in a little while. Any final thoughts? Any final messages you want to send out, Cami?
Just recommend everyone to subscribe to the Defiant to track everything that will be happening in this crypto winter. So the Defiant.io. We have a great newsletter, a YouTube channel, and a podcast. So besides that, yeah, I think, for me, crypto has always been just like a long-term game. If you believe this thing is here to stay, then, you should expect kind of volatility, but kind of a long-term upward trend. I still obviously kind of believe that and believe Web3, DeFi, whatever, NFT, whatever you want to call it, but a more decentralized way. And a way where people are in control of their assets and their information. I believe that it will be the future, if you want to be grand like that, or I just believe that's kind of the way things will increasingly be in the future. So that's why I'm optimistic even amid kind of this crash.
Yeah, nice one. Jason, any final thoughts?
No, I'll reiterate what we've said, like adoption and usability, I think are the name of the game going forward. It's definitely what we're trying to track. It's definitely what we're working on. So if people are interested in that, follow us on social, have a look at what we're building for Wisdom Tree Prime. But I think that's the thing to track is usability and adoption for the space is going to be what makes this work in the coming 18 months.
Yeah, usability, adoption, user interface, less friction, perhaps privacy. Excellent. Very good. Well, on that note, we are now out of time. I hope everyone found today's podcast useful and informative. As a reminder, if you'd like us to cover any specific topics in future episodes, please send us an email, cryptoclarified@wisdomtree.com, or follow us on Twitter. You can find me at Benjamin Dean, and you can also find Jason at Guthrie Camilla is there as well, Camilla Russo, founder of The Defiant, thedefiant.io. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking with everyone today. And we will see you again next month with a big new report, which is going to be very interesting from Wisdom Tree. Thank you very much.